Solar power is really boring, and that's a good thing. So this is my 6-month review of my solar PV system. A little bit over 6 months actually. It was turned on December 14th of last year, 2020, and it's July 8th right now. I'm gonna go over 4 things in this video. Why solar power is boring, what I've learned in the 6 months of having solar power about the system, stats I think are important to know if you're interested in solar, and then finally my 4 criteria that I think one needs to have in order to basically install a solar system on their home. 4 criteria. So first thing I'm gonna talk about, why is solar power boring and why is that a good thing? Well, by boring I mean it's easy. The system doesn't produce any noise. There's been no maintenance. I think I've gone up on a ladder with a hose and washed them off once because it hadn't rained in a while. But other than that, there's no maintenance. The system does what it was advertised to do. I haven't had to call anybody, have them come out and work on the system in 6 months. It's just been really boring. It just does what it's supposed to do. Silently, it's always there, no maintenance. And if there is maintenance, there's 2 main warranties, right? There's the manufacturer's 25-year warranty for the panels and the inverters, and there's the installer's 15-year warranty for workmanship issues or anything like that. And also, obviously, no electric bill. Now, there is a service charge every month, regardless, $16.05. I already talked about that. That's if you're connected to the grid, you pay that for Indiana, Michigan Power. But other than that, it's boring. It does what it's supposed to do. There's no fuss. There's no issues. There's no it's not like a car where something will go wrong eventually. It doesn't matter how reliable it is. Before moving on to the second thing, there is one small issue. On my far left, lower left panel, you can see it's misaligned. It's kind of top left corner is kind of falling down because of the weight. So it's not perfectly aligned, but it's only by a couple centimeters. Not a huge issue. If that keeps falling to where you can see the gap between the panels, then I'll probably call and be like, hey, can you come out and fix this? But so far, it's not a big deal. Okay, so moving on to the second thing I want to talk about. What I've learned in 6 months about solar PV that maybe I just didn't know before, or I just kind of picked up as I go along. I'm gonna read from my notes here, so excuse me for that. Obviously, I already said why they're boring. They work as advertised. They just work. It just works. Extreme cold or extreme heat do not seem to affect production. So, what do I mean by that? January, February, if it was a full sunny day, you can see it on the graphs, I got full production from that day, or what I assume to be. Extreme heat, same thing. If it's sunny, there's no clouds, you'll see the curve, it looks like it's full. Maybe it does, but as far as production goes, I can't tell. So in fact, I think production's more concerned with the angle of the sun on the panels and the length of day, which I'll get into. So extreme heat, extreme cold. If there is an effect on production, I can't tell. The next thing that I've learned, and this is something that people always talk about, even if it's rainy or extremely cloudy or both or whatever, a day with no sun, the system still produces anywhere from 2 kilowatt hours if it's just really dark and dreary, to anywhere from up to 10 to 12 kilowatt hours. Bottom line with that is, if it's cloudy or overcast, rainy all day, the system still produces energy. It's not very much energy, but it still produces energy. Shorter days in the winter Shorter days in the winter do produce less power or less energy than longer days in the summer, and this should be obvious. So a full sun day in January produces power from about 8 a.m. to 5:15 p.m. or 9 hours and 15 minutes, while full sun in June, for example, provides power from 6:15 a.m. to about 9 p.m. or 14 hours and 45 minutes. So that makes sense. So the graph of energy that's being produced is longer during the summer than it is for the winter, because the days are longer in the summer. The angle of the sun's a little bit better for production, I think, during the summer. Yeah, so that's kind of self-explanatory. And here's what kind of gets interesting to me. So peak power of the system, it's an 8 kilowatt DC system, but with the microinverters and entropy and all that physics stuff, the actual maximum output for AC power, because the inverters take the DC power from the sun, turn it to AC power that goes into the grid, into the house, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. The max output in AC is 5.9 kilowatts. On a full Sunday, the system hits that max power output of 5.9 kilowatts continuously for a longer period of time in April and May than it does in June, and from what I've seen so far in July. And I'm not really sure why this is. So for example, I'll just go from January, I'll talk about April, and then June for full sun, for peak power days. So in January, peak power lasts from 11:15 to 2:15, or about 3 hours. In April, it lasts from 11 a.m. to 4:15 p.m., about 5 hours and 15 minutes. And then in June, on a full sun day, peak power lasts from 11:45 a.m. to 3:15 p.m., 3 hours and 30 minutes. So in April, it's almost 2 hours longer that you get peak power. Yeah, I'm not sure why that is. I had to guess it's because the angle of the sun in the summertime is like higher than optimal, is what it should be. So in the wintertime, it's like right above this tree line here. And then in the summertime, it's like almost, the sun's like almost straight up. So like April, May, you're kind of getting that perfect angle of the sun across the panels. I also think that in the summertime, because of the humidity, some days with full sun, it's actually pretty hazy outside. What do I mean by hazy? It's just humid, like it's sunny, but like there's just like a haze in the air. So I think that affects a little bit of production as well, just the haze. In the winter months, spring months, fall months, there's less humidity in the air. So that probably plays a factor into it as well. Is it anything you need to be concerned about with a solar system? No, it is what it is. Okay, so I've talked about why solar power is boring, things I've learned. Now let's go over stats. The stats in 6 months, the ones that I think are important. So total production, 6 megawatt hours, a little bit more than 6 megawatt hours, which equates to over 6,000 kilowatt hours. So 1 megawatt hour is 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy. So when you tell somebody, hey, this produced 6 megawatt hours, sounds pretty impressive, right? Well, I think it is. As far as monetary goes, that equates to about $780.80. You can think of that as saved or produced if you calculate cost at 13 cents per kilowatt hour, which is the number I use. The amount I've produced for the grid, meaning the excess energy that I put back in the grid that probably goes to the next couple houses down, or I don't know what happens to it. That'd be subject for another video. 3,521 kilowatt hours is how much I've kicked back into the grid. A little bit more than half of the energy I've produced has gone back into the grid. The rest I've consumed. Average production per day, it comes out to about 30 kilowatt hours per day average. This is an interesting one. Percentage of time that the electricity produced by the panels fueled my Chevy Volt with electricity. This question is inconclusive, essentially. So the last 4 months of bills, March, April, May, and June, we've produced more than what we've consumed. So we have not paid for electricity for those months. So in those months, it's safe to say that yes, all the electricity that I drove in my Volt was produced with these panels. It's inconclusive because the months of December, January, February, yes, the system produced, yes, it probably produced some energy from my Volt, but I also probably pulled some energy from the grid for my Volt. So I would say it's been definitely over 50% of the energy, probably 70 to 80% actually, but it's very difficult to calculate that. And I'm sure some math wizard, engineering explain, whatever, could figure that out. I just didn't want to because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You got the system, you plug in your car, it needs to be plugged in. If you pull from the grid, okay. If you pull from these panels, okay. You know, it's what it is, kind of thing. So again, months that we have not paid for electricity, March, April, May, June. So we haven't paid for electricity those months, which is great. That's what the system should do. Okay, this is an interesting one. So total amount that I've paid, like on my electric bills, since December when the system was turned on until the last billing period, which took me through June. $454.22 is what we've paid to the electric company for the electricity that we've used. Before this, the system was turned on, our bill was anywhere from 100 to, I think it got close to 200 once in the wintertime. Max production in a day was 54.5 kilowatt hours, and that was May 29th. That in perspective, that would power my Chevy Volt for about 200 miles, calculating about 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour, and my Zero SR for about 545 miles, if you calculate about 10 miles per kilowatt hour. And finally, yes, I did receive the 26% federal tax credit on my tax returns. I received $5,096 as a federal tax credit, which means that lowered my tax liability by $5,096. Some people are confused about this. They think that the credit, like federal government, just gives you money. No, it just reduces your tax liability if your tax liability is high at that or higher. Now, it's one of those ones that if you use all your tax liability, let's say you owe $3,000, that remaining $2,000 will roll over to the next tax year, which is kind of cool. But for me, because we had a high tax liability, I sold some stocks, other things, blah, blah, blah. Capital gains, we had that high tax liability, so it just eliminated that by $5,096, which resulted in a higher refund for us of $5,096. I won't tell you what my refund was, it was a lot. But when the federal government says you're gonna get a tax credit for doing certain activities, you're gonna get a tax credit for doing certain activities. That's law, they have to. It's the law, that's part of the system. All right, so those are my stats in 6 months. All right, finally, fourth thing in this video, my 4 criteria necessary to have a solar PV system installed on your home. All right, number 1, if you own your own home, you're not gonna install a solar PV system on a rental. Landlord's probably not gonna let you, and that would be stupid. So you have to own your own home, that should be obvious. Number 2, you plan to live there for the foreseeable future. This is a 20, 30 year investment, all right? Payback period for this system was supposed to be like 8, 10 years. Bought this house in the country, we're gonna live here hopefully for the rest of our lives. Hopefully, you know how things go. So it's a long-term investment. Number 3, you have a good south-facing roof, unshaded. Check. Our roof is like a perfect south-facing roof, no shade at all, minus the chimney in the evenings. Puts a little shadow on. You don't have to have a perfect south-facing roof. It needs to be either west, preferably west or south. You get the majority of the sun and preferably unshaded. All right, and number 4, and you have the cash to buy the system. You can get a solar system many ways. You can finance it. You can do a PPA, which I don't recommend at all. You can lease a system, which I think is completely stupid. Because if you meet the first 2 criteria, you own your own home, you need to just buy a system outright. And I wouldn't finance it because a PV system is a want, not a need. You shouldn't really finance anything besides your house. You own your own home, you can live there for a long, long time that you know of. You have a good south-facing unshaded roof, and you have the cash to do it. You need to get a solar PV system. I didn't even mention EVs because that's like a bonus. Now you're powering your transportation too. So those are my 4 criteria that if you meet, you should go get a solar PV system installed as soon as possible. I'm not gonna tell you how to do that. Figure it out. You own your own home, you buy your system, you get that nice fat federal tax credit. If you lease, you don't get that. If you finance, you will, but you're financing. You're paying interest for something that's probably not producing more than what you're paying in interest. Okay, that's my video. Solar power is really boring, and that's a good thing. 6-month review. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment below. Ask me a question. I would love to answer it. I will see you next time. Bye.